Yo, what's going on, guys? Today we are going to be talking about the Wheel of Time episode 4. Man, this was an awesome episode. I've started to catch on to like what the Wheel of Time's doing, what Rafe Judkins is doing with his storytelling, and I think it's really cool setting up like basically a character per episode of who we're going to think is going to be the Dragon Reborn. And it's really cool to sort of watch. This one was obviously a very Nynaeve centered episode. I thought ended up being very perfect, but there was a lot of things that sort of happened in this episode and I really want to go over it. Be sure before we start, guys, to like and subscribe, comment below what you thought about the episode, and we will get into it. All right, so let's start off with like the beginning of this episode. The way that they are depicting Logain is so awesome. I never really had like expectations for Logain. I liked him in the books enough. I really like what they're doing with the men and the channeling and the darkness and sort of like the weaves that they're doing, where the women have this like white pure and they have more of this dark sort of tone going, which I think is actually really perfect. I really liked that it manifested differently of these different personalities that are going on with him, and he thinks that it's actually previous dragons that are talking to him, so that sort of sets up his motive of like why he would be doing this, because he thinks that other previous dragons are talking to him to save the world, when like obviously we know that is like not the case. And they set up this like conflict and drama through the whole time of being like, what if we gentle the Dragon Reborn? Like, this is going to be bad, but we already know that he's 10 years too old to be the Dragon Reborn anyway. I really like how they depicted it, but the madness isn't always like people like talking to you or hearing voices and they're not there, or seeing people and they're not there. Like, there's other things like shadows and things in the corner of your eye. Like, they describe it in the books very different ways. So if they do decide to keep describing men's madness, which I'm sure they will later on in the series, I don't know about this season, but they should have some like variety in there, because it's not always hearing voices or seeing things and stuff like that. So I really like how Logain justified this. He's trying to overcome this certain madness he knows that he probably has, and he's trying to unite them and not kill them and heal the King of Gildon, and I thought that was perfect. Actually makes you like sympathize with him a little bit, even though he's like really menacing. And I think with Leandrin, with her setup of we need to gentle him because like it's gonna end up bad for us, and then at the end of the episode they do end up gentling Logain, and it makes Leandrin seem like she was right, even though they were resisting her the whole time, but like because that wasn't custom. I'm glad they brought that up though, because in the first episode the Red Object gentled somebody without like taking or doing the customs or the law of taking him to the White Tower, but between the conversation with Stepan and Karene, we know that like they were supposed to do that, but they didn't, and they haven't been doing that, and you're not supposed to oppose the Amerlin seat anyway. So they do it really good setup of her like wanting this and try to reimburse it, and they ended up proving her right at the end, right? I also think another thing that was really cool with seeing the warders was seeing Stepan and Land together, and they're having their conversation. Something that I found very interesting was they talked about the Amelin seat was thinking about sending out a team of people to go get Moraine and Lan. So I don't know if it's like, oh, there's something that's about to go down and she needs like the Amelin seat wants to see Moraine or something like that, but it'll be really interesting for show viewers to see the Amelin seat and maybe some things that that are going to be coming up in the future. So that'd be really cool to see. Oh yeah, and they just keep like hammering it down of us wanting to hate Leandrin. Like she intentionally says Nynaeve's like name wrong, but Nynaeve always just coming back with it perfect, just like, well, maybe that's because you've never like spoken to me, that's why you mispronounced it. And then it's like, I'm assuming you want something, so I'm gonna ask the questions here, and I'm like, you go Nynaeve, you're a boss. I love it. We cut over to Perrin and Egwene and stuff like that, and they sort of are with the Tinkers, and they're like, we're not really trusting of them or whatever. More Perrin's that way, and we actually get some exposition with them. Something that I've noticed in the episodes though is just like Egwene is sort of that person is like, what about this thing, and then they like go on to give exposition for like however long, and I don't think it's bad exposition. It's through dialogue and there's comedic timing, and it's like spread out throughout the entire episode. We cut to other scenes like with Matt and Rand and stuff like that, but it's like Egwene has constantly been that person that's like, and what about this thing, what, that's not right, and then she goes on to like the other person explain to the world, and I've like just picked up on that a little bit. I don't know as much of a complaint, but it's like it's starting to notice now. We also go over to Matt and Rand, who find this barn with Tom, and I love how like they're trying to be sneaky, but like literally Tom is like screaming like, I have found a barn, and it's like, oh, like aren't we supposed to be quiet and like sneaking in there like later that night? But he's like screaming and like running towards it on his horse, and this is where we get sort of the setup for Nynaeve. There's 5 of us, there's only 4 of us that went with Moraine. What is this 5th one that dark friend was talking about? And then we cut over to Nynaeve and stuff, and we see all that sort of stuff. So it really just sets up Nynaeve being this person. I think in episode 1 they really set up Egwene to be that person, or episode 2, something like that. So I think they're just going to go through kind of each person of being like, could they not be? We also see Matt starting to go a little bit crazy here, and it's like, oh, the madness could be taking him, right? So they're also going that angle. But Matt and Rand end up getting to this barn with Tom, and they're just like, we'll camp here tonight, and they're like loud, and I'm like, the house is right there, like what are you guys talking about? And then like this dude pulls up on him and is just like, no, like you're not. I think this is a perfect part to show Rand could be a peacekeeper, sort of like setting little seedlings here. He sort of gets them out of this like little trouble because he knows bows and stuff like that. So that was a really cool thing to see. Now I'm gonna go to the scene with I love that they're basically after that the farmers are just like, yeah, you can stay in the barn. Basically you just got to clean up all their crap off the floor. So they're like shoveling a whole bunch of like stuff off of the floor, and Tom's just sitting there drinking, like he's not doing anything, and they're like, how do we get stuck with this? And he's just over there like drinking, and he's like, but I love the stuff where, because like Tom is supposed to teach them lessons and stuff like that, and I just love how he's just like, I don't know. I just love how he's just relaxing, and then they're just like having to do all the hard work. Then we get to this really creepy scene where Matt has to go off and he like throws up, and then we see this darkness like from Shadar Logoth, and then he stands up and we see this darkness coming out of his mouth and going back in, and that more looked like the darkness from the weaves and stuff like that. So it's very interesting of like, as a viewer, I think you can put it together. Like as a new viewer, you guys tell me, do you think it's Shadar Logoth? Do you think it's like the taint, he's using the power, or not the taint, the corruption? But anyway, so we get over to this little girl, and she has this doll, and it really sets up like Matt loving his sisters and remembering them, and I think that's a great part of his character that they've added in. But she has this little doll named Brigitte, which is really awesome for book lovers. There you will know who Brigitte is, and I'm excited for her in the show. But so she has this doll named Brigitte, and it's like, oh wow, that's like really cool. Then we cut over to Rand and Tom is giving him a story about Owen, his nephew, and how he had the signs of basically being corrupted by the One Power and starting to go mad and stuff like that, and he tried to protect his nephew and all that sort of stuff, but the Aes Sedai got to him, and then he was gentled, and after that he basically killed himself because he didn't want to be alive anymore without the power. I basically summed that up very quickly, but it does it very well in the show, and that's a thing in the books, and I really just like love seeing that from the books being told in the TV show. But the consensus of that is basically Tom is just like, Matt is showing these signs that he is starting to be, that he is channeling and he is corrupted by the One Power and stuff like that. So we need to watch after him, and we need to make sure that he doesn't get caught up with Aes Sedai, because they're going to gentle him and he's going to kill himself and all these bad things. And then Rand's like, oh, okay, got it. Another thing I wanted to add, I don't mean to ruin the show for people, but every time we see Moiraine, they have a light fan on her. So they have a little bit of a fan blow going that like her hair is like going off in the wind a little bit. But basically every time we see her, that's going on, which I think is really interesting. I don't know if it's supposed to signify she's using the power. That's like initially when I thought it was, but now I've seen it a lot of times without her using the power, at least on screen, and you could just like see her hair like flowing in the wind, and I'm like, ever so slightly, you'll have to like look out for it the next time. But yeah, almost every time she's on screen, it's just like this little wind that's going at her. It's really funny. I also love the scene of the diversity of the warders. I know we have a tendency of thinking that all warders are like Lan, but Lan is more of this stoic sort of person, and not all warders would be like him. They're all very in personality and stuff like that, and I love seeing all the warders around the campfire, seeing the like the diverse relationships and stuff like that. They sort of then go into the exposition of the Aes Sedai and how they are servants of all, and it's not just like you're their lapdogs and stuff like that, but that's sort of like the joke that's going on. Alana then shows up and then takes off her 2 warders, and it's implying they're about to go to Pound Town, and basically Nynaeve is just like, oh, is that, yeah, that, and then Steppen's like, and then Lan's like, well, I'm tired too, and he walks off, and then Nynaeve's like, like she doesn't know what to think, and then Steppen like gives a pretty good laugh out of it. After that, we go to the scene with Lan and Moiraine, and they're sort of talking about how this Dragon Reborn is basically too old, and at this point, like, they don't even know who it could be, and they've lost the kids. And then she says that the Dark One is probably as clueless as they are too, and then he's like, I don't know if that's comforting or not, and they sort of like hold hands for a second, and it's just like, he was like, I shouldn't have drank because you always get emotional when I drink, and it was just a good wholesome sort of moment together. Then we go back to the Tinkers, and I love this main sort of dialogue between Perrin and the older woman that has taken them in. I forget her name, I'm so sorry. She talks about this whole sort of revenge story that she wanted to get against the people that killed her daughter, and that basically the best way to fight back violence is with peace, and the best way to fight against death is life. And I thought it was really good. It's actually stuff in my own like stories that I'm trying to do right now, is peace the best option against violence, because people could just like trample over you or a nation and stuff like that. So it's really interesting, and I love those sort of concepts. I love that she brought up that Perrin finds peace in the work, and he's like, anybody could do this work because he's just doing hard labor while everybody's partying. And she's like, yeah, but you find peace in it. And I thought that was really good, because whenever Perrin is going through a lot, he wants to do hard labor, and he thinks while he goes through that hard labor. And I think it's really cool. That's why he loves blacksmithing. But yeah, that was a really good moment. That was a really good way to show off like the Tinkers, and specifically why people believe what they believe. The people that have seen the most violence know like how bad it is, basically. And that's why they come and join them. And it leaves really good open-ended questions for Perrin to sort of think about. Yeah, and that's sort of what's reflected through his character throughout the series, so I love it. Then they go to Aram's character and stuff like that with the Tinkers, and he's talking with Egwene, and basically they set it up different from the books, but at 20 they get to go off like the Amish and go out into the outer world and see if they want and like experience other ways of life, and whether they want to come back or go out into the world and all that sort of stuff. And basically saying that he's like sort of coming up on that, and that he could choose to leave or not, which is different from the books, which is really interesting. But I like this sort of like Amish sort of go with it. Yeah, I can get why people don't like that though, so let me know what you sort of thought about in that moment, with spoiler warnings below and stuff like that as for book readers. And we get over to Matt and Rand, and Rand's just like, hey man, you're like, they're about to go to sleep, and he's like, hey, like, I'm here for you, like whatever you need, like, you know, I'm here for you. And I thought that was just a really sweet, awesome moment. Like I said, I love whenever these brothers like come together and really care for each other. And they go to sleep, and Rand has this dream, and it's like really crazy. Perrin is like beating a tinker with a hammer. Matt has blood on his hands, and then he has that thing coming out of his mouth. And then Egwene, it looks like it was like something kind of like the White Tower, and then she's being pulled away by this like dude who has fire coming out of his mouth. So it's a lot to really take from, and they wake up immediately to Matt not being there, and they run into the house and everybody is dead. So it's like the blood on the hands of Matt. But then we see Matt, and we don't see any blood on his hands, and we don't see the dagger having any blood. So that's why I'm like, I don't think that he killed this whole family. He looks up and he says, I see you, and a fade comes out from the shadow. And they're like run, and Tom's like, get him out of here. And I love how the fade travels through the shadow. Like, that's something that's described in the books and stuff like that a lot. So he's like up there in the darkness in the shadow, and then it's like whoom, and he goes to the darkness in the bottom of the stairs, and Tom is fighting him off, and they run off, and they see the little girl dead on the ground, and we don't really know what's going to happen with Tom. And I'm like, oh my gosh, Tom is just fighting this fade, which are known to be like impossible to kill. So that was like really cool to see, and they sort of run off. Then we go over to Lan and Nynaeve, and Lan is praying, and he gives some exposition about his people and Markier and stuff like that. And then Nynaeve is sort of praying herself, and she speaks in the Old Tongue, and they sort of bond over this moment about the Old Tongue and her parents and all of this, and it's a really sweet sort of moment. We sort of get more of their chemistry, and it's interrupted by the Dragonsworn invading the camp. And this whole scene is really cool. I loved how they put this all together. I think one of the highlights was showing off Alana and her warders, and how they all just like work together very well, and just showing off how like these Aes Sedai, one of them could hold back an entire army. Like, she's like blowing everything up left and right, and it was really cool. So from there, Logain basically breaks free from his cage and from the shield. So after he's sort of broken out of this, they try to go back and shield him, Moraine, Leandrin, and Karene, or Kareen. I called her Kareen for the longest time. And he tries to get on the last bit of power and kill them, and Karene ends up sacrificing herself to save both of them. And this is a really good moment where we see the bond between an Aes Sedai and a warder, because at that moment, Stepan in the battle can feel Karene dying, and he needs to run off and go save her. So they run off with Lan and Nynaeve, and they go see what's happening. Basically, they're trying to hold the shield. Stepan Stepin sees that Karene is dead, and he goes after her, and he tries to double axe Logain. We covered that sort of in the trailer. Wanted to speculate that moment, and we finally see it here. Basically, Logain, through the shield, is able to infuse the axes with the taint, or the corruption in his power, and explode the axes, and killing almost everybody in the room. They're all bleeding out. And we get this awesome moment with Nynaeve after the setup of her being like, could be the Dragon Reborn, right? Or they have the potential to be. And she is over top of Lan, who is bleeding out and dying. And in this like fit of rage, she's able to have an explosion of the one power, and it just like blows Logain away. He can't see it because they can't see the women's side of the channeling, but like his weaves all disperse. There's like a huge circle of like a shockwave go out when she uses the power, so he can like see, he can like sense that, and he can see the effects of her channeling basically. And he's like, holy crap, that is insane. And it's just like, it is the best scene of the show so far. And it's really bumped up my ratings for this episode. So we see Nynaeve awesome healing everybody, and they all the Aes Sedai get up and they link together. Liandrin then gentles Logain in this really cool depiction of like ripping it out of him basically, and we get to see linking. So like, I'm sure people like will speculate, or people will put together like what they're doing. They were all giving her like power, and they all link together, and they rip that power out of Logain, and Logain is like shivering, crying on the ground afterwards. And Moraine's sort of just like looking at Nynaeve like, oh my gosh. Or she's either thinking like, okay, what is the repercussions of our actions here? And I'm like, okay, this is, and then we get the stare from Nynaeve at the very end, and it's awesome. It's such a great episode. They did it so well. I will say my rating for this one is going to be an 8.3. I hope it just keeps going up from here. I have a feeling Brandon says that episode 6 is like 10 out of 10 best television written. He didn't see, I don't think he's seen it yet, but he's like, he's read the scripts, right? So I'm hoping like episode 6 can get into that like 9 range for me, but we'll see. I would love to hear the thoughts from you guys. I always love talking about Wheel of Time with you guys. Be sure to like and subscribe, and I will see you guys in the next video.